last month, and this meeting today is focused on market. And our first guest is Buzz Smith, Tom Smith, his twin, and I went to somewhere north of Dallas. Believe it or not, it was 5 years ago, or just about 5 years ago, because we heard there was this fella up there that was selling electric cars left and right, and he was the biggest electric car salesman in Texas, if not the nation. And so Smitty and I went up there and visited with him, and what we found was a guy that already was well ahead of most of us in terms of understanding the market. So I asked Buzz if he would do a piece on the market. He has done some videotapes for us, and he's done some stand-ups when we had the show there in Austin. He's about as informed as anybody I know, and plus he's got the enthusiasm, and he's got the high-tech background. He comes from a computer high-tech background, so he's well suited to do this. And he should have been on TV a long time ago, because I think he took his jacket off. I'm not sure why, but he took his jacket off.
It's a little warm for that jacket, even indoors.
but at any rate, he's got a slide deck that he's going to go through, and you will find it totally entertaining, whether you're at Electric Transportation 101 or you're in a graduate course right now. This will be an entertaining presentation. So with that, take it away.
Okay.
Love the backdrop. Love the backdrop.
Oh, those are paintings that my oldest daughter did.
That's great.
She specializes in Texas musicians.
Oh,
all right.
God, that's absolutely beautiful.
There's the jacket. All right, take it away.
Okay, I'm Buzz Smith, the EV evangelist. I've been preaching and spreading the good news about EVs for a while, so let's just jump right into this. So some basic education, we need to understand the terminology. So there's hybrid versus PHEV versus EV. My car is a PHEV, a plug-in hybrid. The typical original hybrid, think back to the original Prius. The battery is in the car, but you don't plug it in. It's a much smaller battery than most EVs have. And if you get above 35 miles an hour, it's going to switch to gasoline and use, because gasoline is actually more efficient once you get above about 35 miles an hour. We go below 35 miles an hour, it'll switch to electricity to be more efficient. Sounds like a brilliant idea, but then Chevrolet came out with a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, and they put in a bigger battery pack, making sure that it was bigger than most Americans would drive in a single average day. And what they found was they ended up, instead of straining to get 50 miles an hour or miles per gallon in a traditional hybrid, they were getting over 100 miles per gallon, because on most days it stayed 100% electric. And then of course, a battery electric vehicle, or BEV or EV, is completely electric and has no gasoline, oil, filters, anything like that to maintain. Very low maintenance cost, but usually will have a much bigger battery pack than the other types of vehicles. Okay, let's go on. Now, this is just real quick. These are the PHEVs that the federal government currently offers or has offered a federal income tax credit on. The next slide will show the electric vehicles that are out there. And there are over 82 models out there, and people just aren't aware of this. Let's head on to the next one. Now, I'm not going to read all these slides to you, but this one's critical because this is about what is going to happen right, or is happening right now. All new technologies have adoption curves. So think about this S-looking curve here being how many cars are being, or how many EVs are being bought. You can see for the longest time, you're in that yellow area, and adoption is very, very slow. And then suddenly, well, it'll seem suddenly, although actually it's been over 10 years already, the public becomes aware and they realize this is what they want, and adoption will take off suddenly. And that's the green zone. And that's where we are right now. Now, as technologies get older and new technologies come online, you'll see that the S curve levels off and eventually will decline as some better technology comes along. And you can see the S curve right here happening. This is just looking from 2012 to 2021. And there it is. It is taking off. And the battery electric vehicles are the green block there. So out there, people are already realizing they don't need the training wheels of PHEV because they've had this false idea of range anxiety. They can go ahead and get a 100% electric vehicle, and that's caused the adoption rate of those to be 71% of the market. But you can see that curve is already forming. Now, there's kind of a lag there you see between 2018 and 2019. That affected not only EVs, but all electric vehicles. There was a minor recession in the automotive world, and I experienced that when I was selling cars. There were days that nobody came on the lot. There are statements out there that I've read that says ICE, or internal combustion engines, peaked in 2017, and they are now on a permanent decline to be replaced by the new technologies that we're all interested in. Now, this is electric vehicle sales, both in California, the green curve, and in the US. And these are cumulative sales. Again, we can see that S curve taken off. We can see that mini recession that happened between the fourth quarter of 2018 and 2020, but we're recovering from that. Overall, the cumulative purchase rate is going way up. Again, BEVs are going faster than everybody. And we can see that actually California is a little below average when you look at the entire country. Everybody thinks California is the be all end all to EVs, but actually Texas is one of the top adopters of EVs as well. And we'll see that in a little bit. Now, these are Texas counties. In Texas, the big adoption is going to be Travis, of course, where Austin is, Harris County, where Houston is. Third place is Dallas. You get all the way down to about sixth place, where I live, Tarrant County. But when you're talking about the bigger cities, adoption's happening right now at a much higher volume than the rural areas are. And one of the things that finally rural areas are starting to understand is they don't have to worry about EV range anymore, with the average vehicle having about 200, 250 miles of range. And city governments are starting to realize, smaller cities, that the way they're going to attract people into their town to find out about their town is having EV charging infrastructure. In the 19th century, your town prospered if the railroad came through. In the 20th century, if the interstate highway system came through your town would prosper. In the 21st century, it's going to be EV charging infrastructure, because EV drivers don't hit the road without knowing where the chargers are that they're going to use. So they will plan to visit your town before they ever hit the road if you install that charger. And we're seeing that starting to be understood by the smaller towns now. Now, this is the electrification transition goals of manufacturers. And you can see in 2025, your Mercedes-Benz is saying 50% of their vehicles will be electric. Volkswagen, 20%, Volvo, 50%. Move forward to 2030, and you see Mercedes is saying 100%, Volvo saying 100%. Now, GM hasn't made any real statement until 2030, but even Cadillac has already declared that they're going to become a 100% electric vehicle brand. You get to 2040, and you're looking at carbon neutrality across the industries. You're looking at, we're going to move on from that. Carbon neutrality, big time in 2045, complete in 2050 for BMW, for Nissan, for Subaru, for Volkswagen. But the earliest carbon neutral companies, it looks like, will be General Motors and Volvo. Now, how soon can all this really happen? This is a great example, because this is about transportation, and these two photographs were taken 10 years apart. Easter morning, 1900 and 13 years apart in 1913. On the left picture, all of those vehicles in the traffic jam are horses and buggies, except for one automobile that is circled in red. You jump forward 13 years, and there's not a single horse and buggy on that street anymore. So it can happen very fast, even with things that are the second largest purchase that most people will ever make. Let's back up 2. Okay, excuse me, let's go forward 1, sorry. Now, adoption curves typically run like that S curve. Now, not everybody, takes off at the same time. And if all of these vehicles mentioned in this chart came out on the same day, this is how their cumulative adoption curves would have formed. And you look at that black one and it just blows everybody else away. And what is happening there, that's the Prius, the original Prius hybrid. And it was in an adoption curve, just like all these other vehicles that I've been plotting, up until about the 45th, 46th month. And then it took off like a rocket because gas prices spiked. Remember this, gas prices spiked, it drove adoption. And the gold standard for new transportation technology adoption used to be that car, the Prius. Let's jump forward again. This curve is like a rocket launching from the very beginning. And that's the Model 3 from Tesla. They had 400,000 orders before they ever built the first one. And you can see the first 7, 8, 9 months, it looks like they were being adopted just like any other car. And that really was not because of the market. They would have taken off faster, but they had some production problems in the beginning. They got solved right around the 9th, 10th month. And then all those cars started shipping. And it's just unbelievable that it took off like this. Cybertruck, now that when the Model 3 came out, there were 400,000 pre-orders. Cybertruck, the last time I looked, already had 1.25 million reservations waiting for that vehicle. Next. The Ford F-150 Lightning has 120,000 reservations, and Ford capped it at that point. Go ahead. Rivian already had 30,000 reservations for the R1T pickup and the R1S SUV. And they were already looking for a second factory, and Texas was on their short list. Unfortunately, they ended up putting that second factory in Georgia. But this is where another thing's going to change. There's been this political divide where conservatives seem to be against EVs and liberals were for EVs. And the conservative side of the desk is now thinking, wait a minute, these are factories, these are jobs, this is national security, this is international competition. And so the political barriers are starting to come down against EVs, and we're going to see much, much faster adoption as that moves forward. Now, the problem right now are dealers and salespeople. Go ahead and read this as you go down there. The big problem is that the salespeople in the automotive world are 100% commission. And what that means is if they don't sell a car, they don't make a commission. An EV customer comes in and they're going to have tons of questions. So it's going to be a very slow sales cycle. And in fact, what I've discovered was in my customers, they would typically come to the dealership 4 different times before they actually made a purchase. The gasoline car average is about 1.4 visits to a dealership. Well, yeah, we've all been driving gasoline powered cars for, our entire lifetimes, and they've been on the market for 120 years. So nobody has major questions about gasoline powered vehicles. They do about electric vehicles because they've never had one before. And it was critical that these salespeople step up and become the automotive sales consultants that they claim to be instead of just sales clerks. Unfortunately, the salesperson has a different lens. They're looking at it as how much money they make per hour. If you walk in and say you want to buy a pickup truck, they're going to say regular cab, crew cab, double cab, long bed, short bed, 4-wheel drive, 2-wheel drive, V4, V8, V6, what engine do you want? And then the last question, what color you want? Okay, let's go out and get it. And they make a sale, they make a good sized commission. And so their hourly rate is very high. If you take 4 different trips to the dealership to buy an EV and ask questions for an hour each time, their hourly rate plummets. Now, how many of us would, voluntarily take a pay cut to save the planet? Well, probably everybody on this conference call would, but that's not the case in automotive sales. So they're actually opposed to selling electric vehicles. People think it's the dealerships. It's not the dealerships, it's the sales staff. Okay, let's move on. Now, what buyers need to know in order to make an informed decision about an electric vehicle is, for instance, here, how much do they pay for electricity per kilowatt hour? And believe it or not, most people don't know that number. How far they commute every day. Most people are very intimate, have an intimate understanding of that. Where they'll charge, they're clueless about that if they've never had an EV before. How often they drive beyond the EV range. Most people think they drive a lot further than they do overall, not their daily commute, but overall. Americans are biased that way. And, there's some other things. Hopefully you've all read that there. And let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Now, the vehicle trends, this is what we came to hear about. Trucks and SUVs. And I have an exclamation mark there because I've been telling everybody that that's when the tipping point will happen, is when the electric trucks and the electric SUVs come out. And this is why. In 47 of the 50 United States, a pickup truck is the #1 form factor. So nobody, or the vast majority of people, didn't want an EconoBox commuter car. They wanted something that they would normally pick if it was gasoline powered, but they wanted it to be electric before they would make the step into that world. Autonomous vehicles are coming, and that's going to make a big change. My mother couldn't drive at the end of her life because she couldn't see very well anymore. Autonomous vehicles are going to have all of us be independent more often, that are further into our lifespan, and that is going to be a market driver. Vehicle sharing and a subscription model, several manufacturers have talked about doing that. COVID may have put a damper on vehicle sharing, but I believe that will be a trend in the future. If you haven't read the book Autonomy, I highly recommend it. Three-wheeled EVs, because they have fewer regulations, they're considered to be a motorcycle, are going to be coming out, and there's some great choices in that area. And then finally, skateboards, not the ones that you may have ridden on as a teenager, and we'll see what that is in just a little bit. And did somebody mention pickup trucks? Well, yeah. And here's some of the ones that are either out already or coming out. Bollinger Motors, Lordstown. Actually, Lordstown's being built at an old GM plant in Ohio. General Motors with the Hummer, and now the Chevrolet Silverado EV. Ford F-150 Lightning, the Atlas, Rivian, and Tesla. But before we go on to the next slide, notice in the pictures where they're showing the cars out in the world, how they are marketing them. These are adventure vehicles now. It's not green. It's not save the planet. It's look at how much fun you can have on these amazing vehicles. Finally, Detroit and the rest of the world is figuring out the way you sell an electric car is exactly the way you sell a gasoline car. You appeal to what people care about. And unfortunately, most car buyers, when it comes time to pick a car, aren't thinking about saving the planet first. Okay, here we go. The first one here, this is the Chevrolet. No, this is the Ford F-150 Lightning. Again, they are marketing it as an adventure vehicle. They got a tent up over the bed there with a ladder that goes up to it. Everybody's going, for the big touch screens and all. But I have actually ridden in one of these at the North Texas Auto Show. They punched that accelerator. It was exciting. It was a great truck. And it was exactly like the interior of a Ford, except for that big display. If you like pickup trucks, you're going to love this electric pickup truck. Here's the Rivian R1T, which is their pickup truck. Again, they've got surfboards on it. They've got camping. They've got the big touch screen as well. Rivian has done very well. I was fortunate enough to go through a Rivian delivery with a friend of mine that got one, and they do an excellent job of post-sale delivery where they teach the customer about that car as long as that customer wants to sit there and learn about it. But what will eventually happen is they'll become antsy and say, hey, man, I want to go take this thing on the road, and end the discussion at that point. But that is a key feature that we need to make sure all the auto dealers are doing. Educate the customer before they go home. There we go. I just saw this for the first time at the North Texas Auto Show. This is the Chevy Silverado EV. This is a stunning truck. You can see they've got add-ons like toolboxes that go into the front, but this is going to be a big hit. And both the Ford and the Chevrolet at the work truck level, which they call WT, are going to start at $40,000. Now, Chevrolet, being part of GM, no longer participates in the federal income tax credit of $7,500, but Ford still does. So you get that Ford, and they get the Texas rebate and the federal income tax credit, and you're talking about a $30,000 truck. When I sold Chevys for a living, there were, it was easy to sell a $50,000, $60,000, even $70,000 pickup truck to people. And everybody, oh, EVs are too expensive. They're rich white men's toys. These electric trucks are going to break that mold. We're going to see regular, everyday blue collar workers get these trucks taken to the work site, plug their power tools into the trucks because they have 110 outlets in the front, and then do their work using the electricity from that truck. These are game changers. Of course, the Cybertruck, I never wanted a pickup truck in my life until I saw this. This is just a really cool looking vehicle to me. They're going to be built in Texas, so the Texan in me loves it. They're already going to expand the factory that Tesla has put up in Austin. But again, the marketing is going to be focusing on things like adventures. This is the Hyundai Ioniq 5. It has a twin called the Kia EV6. Let's go ahead and take a look at the EV6 as well. Identical specs in both these cars. They're basically like, think of like Buick and Pontiac, both being divisions of GM. Kia and Hyundai are both sister companies. These are phenomenal vehicles. Again, game changers. If you like the crossover style factor, this doesn't have that frumpy econo car look anymore. You can see they're very sporty. They had the Kia EV6 GT all-wheel drive at the North Texas Auto Show in the ride and drive event. So I got to ride in one of those. That thing launches like a rocket ship. It is a blast, and it's on my short list for my next vehicle. I mentioned Cadillac earlier, going 100% electric. This is the Cadillac Lyriq. They are in production right now. They're starting to be delivered. The Lyriq is the first vehicle that GM has produced that will have the Ultium battery pack in it. The Hummer actually was the very first one, but that's a $140,000 vehicle that most people won't be able to afford. But this Lyriq is actually in the normal Cadillac pricing range. Of course, they don't get the income tax credit, so they've got to keep that price at a place that they can compete with the other manufacturers out there. This is a new one. This is the Nissan Ariya. I saw this at the North Texas Auto Show, although it wasn't in the ride and drive event. Again, they're selling it as an adventure vehicle. It's kind of an SUV. It's bigger than most of the smaller looking crossovers. It's edging into that SUV territory, which, because that is one of the #1 form factors desired in the United States. This, I think, is going to be something that's really going to take off. But Nissan is on the verge of losing their income tax credit because of the Nissan Leaf. So many of those have sold since 2010 that later this year, Nissan will start seeing a phase out of their income tax credit eligibility. So you'll need, if you want one of these, go get one soon. Next is the Ford Mustang Mach-E. They call this an SUV, but it's really a sports car. This thing, in fact, Ford marketed it that way in some aspects. They took one on an oval track and had 5 professional race car drivers in the car at the same time, just smoking that car around the track. There are still some people out there that are biased to the gasoline Mustang. Oh, that's not a Mustang. But the adopters of this car, if you go on Facebook to the owners group, they absolutely love this vehicle, and it's got amazing performance. This is the Fisker Ocean. This is something, again, that's on my short list. I have a deposit on one of these. This is a company that went out of business before. Henrik Fisker was the head of the company and the chief designer back in the day when they created a car called the Fisker Karma, which was a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, very similar to the Chevy Bolt, except the styling was just unbelievably beautiful. It was like a sports car. The company went bankrupt after a unfortunate incident that wasn't their fault. And a Chinese company bought them out, bought their battery producer as well. But Henrik Fisker went back into business, and now he's got another company called Fisker now, and the car is called the Ocean. It's more of a full-sized SUV, and I think it's going to be very popular as well. They'll come out this year. This is my absolute favorite, and as you can see, I actually got to see one in person at South by Southwest. This is Volkswagen's ID Buzz, named after me. And I thank them for that. No, not really. But if you are my age, you remember the 1960s and the hippie vans back then, and they're marketing it that. You can see the surfboards on the roof of it. Phenomenal vehicle. Pretty good price point, and they will qualify for the full 7,500 income tax credit. Unfortunately, these won't start hitting the American shores until about 2024. This is a company called Canoe, and the vehicle is called their lifestyle vehicle. Originally, they had planned to sell this as a subscription model where you would, pay to have this car for a month, let's say, and next month you want their pickup truck. They would just deliver the pickup truck to your house and swap vehicles out as you went along. They also have a sedan planned. You can see it's almost a living room environment in the back of it with a big L-shaped sofa that goes around the back. This is was the headquarters of this company was in Texas, and their production facilities are going to be in Oklahoma and Arkansas. They're supposed to go into production before the end of this year with this particular model. Now, this is a really interesting three-wheeled vehicle. I mentioned how three-wheeled vehicles have lower regulation requirements. This is called the TxETRA. The company was started by two founders, one of which had made boats for a living. And so from the very beginning, his background in computational fluid dynamics made them make this car the sleek looking car it is for wind resistance so that it would be much more efficient. And their philosophy, unlike the 9,000-pound Hummer, which has to have a giant battery in order to be able to go very far, this car is lightweight, made of carbon fiber, and the aerodynamics give it the high-end battery pack. They've got 1,000-mile range per charge and really very powerful acceleration. This is a really interesting car, and I've met one of the co-founders of the company at a panel. We were both panelists in Austin, and this car will go into production. It's either going to be late this year or early next year, and they'll start shipping these. Now, this is kind of a new thing, the skateboard that I mentioned earlier. Cars are going to be built from this chassis up. So the control electronics, the batteries, the cooling system, the motors, the wheels will all be in this chassis, and you can drop whatever body style you want on it. So these companies are making just this part of the car, and they will sell them to other manufacturers who will then finish out the vehicle with whatever type of platform they want to put on top of it. And this is Texas charging infrastructure today, according to PlugShare. This is going to change very quickly. But the one thing I really talk to people about when I'm talking about electric vehicles is range anxiety is a myth. We already have plenty of charging stations for people to do their everyday driving. And when you buy an electric vehicle, you aren't necessarily giving up your gasoline driver's license. If you have to go across country and the charging infrastructure isn't in place where you're going, then you can always rent a gasoline vehicle for that one trip, one time a year, instead of driving that polluting vehicle all year long. And the savings that you will get from maintenance and fuel by owning an EV the rest of the year will more than pay for you to drive the biggest, baddest, most expensive SUV out there. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask those now, but that's the end of my presentation.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Any questions? We've still got a lot of people. You didn't drive anybody off. We got a lot of people.
I heard all those chimes. I thought they were all leaving. I thought I'd come back to a ghost town.
Well, we're almost at 50. So that looks good. Any questions? There, Charles Zeller.
Yeah, quick question. You mentioned parts and repairs, and I'm assuming lower maintenance costs may be a disincentive for dealers in that it could reduce their revenue on EVs. Could you?
What's really interesting about that, they are afraid of that. Dealerships are terrified of it. Their parts departments are terrified of it. But this adventure vehicle stuff is getting the parts department interested because they're going to have all these add-ons they can sell. So they're starting to warm up. And what we found in California, dealerships, there's a vice president of a Chevrolet dealership that said the thing that you gain with an electric vehicle is 100% customer loyalty. This is such a new type of vehicle for them that they won't go anywhere else for maintenance. They're not going to go buy tires anywhere else. A lot of times, any of the accessories, trailer hitches, floor mats, they'll go back to the dealership to get it there rather than let anybody touch their EV other than where they bought it. So what this particular dealership found was revenue wise, they were doing about the same amount of business because they got 100% loyalty. They're getting tire sales they never got before, windshield wiper sales they were never getting before. And that loyalty pays off.
All right, any other questions? So that was an excellent presentation. Thank you so much, Buzz.
Thank you.
I hope everybody enjoyed that as much as I did.